Hello everyone, welcome to lab 4. So today's lab is about AWS compute and storage. So in this lab you'll learn about Amazon S3, Amazon EC2, like how to store files in S3, what is S3, what are the features of S3. We'll do hands-on on it, and then about EC2. So what is EC2, how to create a server on AWS, and how to deploy your application on EC2. So these are the things which you will be learning in this lab. So the first thing is Amazon S3. So like when AWS started, it was one of the fundamental services of AWS. So the first service which they provided to commercial was AWS SQS, and then S3 was the second service which they released to public, like commercially. So what is S3? So it is a simple storage service which is like short for S3, and it is used to store objects. So what do you mean by objects? So when you store a file, let's say text file or MP4 file, MP3 file, PDF file, whatever, when you store on S3, it will be stored as bytes. Like it will be encoded, it will store as bytes. So it is called object. So basically you can store literally anything on S3. There is no limitation of it. So and also like it is infinitely scaling storage. So there is no cap of how much you want to store on S3. Although like there is one limitation that in S3 you store, so like we have folders in our file system. We create folders and then store files. In S3 we store everything in a bucket, and I think there is a limit of a bucket can be of maximum 5 TB in size. So if you want to store something more, a bucket or an object, I think, so you'll need to create another bucket, something like that. So what are the use case of Amazon S3? So first one is like media hosting. So let's say you are running something like a streaming service, YouTube, something like that. So you can store your media on S3 and then stream it to the client side. So you can use it, use S3 for that. Or if you want to back up your data, then you'll be using S3 for that. Also for data lake and other things. You can also use S3 for web hosting. So have you used Netlify or any like Vercel, Netlify, anything? So you are used to deploy your front-end applications. So you can also like use S3 to deploy your website. Like if you have portfolio, anything, you can use this. I have built my portfolio and deployed on S3. Netlify is easier, but why not cloud? So you can use that. It is one of the common use case which you can use to use S3 to deploy your web app. So that. Now there are few constraints in like creating the bucket in S3. So S3 is a global service. What I mean by global is like, let's say AWS has like 250 plus services, which can be EC2, DynamoDB, S3, Lambda function and all. So Lambda function is not a global service because do you know what is AZ, regions, availability zones and all? So let's say there are like 32 regions in AWS. One is US East 1 is Mumbai, then Singapore. There are regions. So not all services are available to all the regions. That is one thing. So when you use S3, it is at the global level. If you use EC2 or Lambda, it is at the regional level. So this is the difference. So S3 and IAM service are regional level. Just one thing you should remember, just in case if you are giving exam of cloud, it can be asked. So that is why you need to have a unique bucket name when you create a bucket in S3. and they must start with a lowercase, no underscore. This is the limit of characters. And these are the features of S3 which I'll show in the hands-on. So first is bucket policy. Bucket policy is used to limit your access of files in S3. So it is called bucket policy. Static website hosting is like when you want to deploy your web app on S3. Then life cycle I'll explain. Versioning is like if you have enabled version, then let's say you have stored XYZ file on S3. Now when you store that updated file again on S3, it will save the version, like older version, new version. So you can go back to the older version if needed. So if you have sensitive data, then you should enable the versioning. And S3 storage classes I'll explain later. So let's start the hands-on. Okay, before hands-on, we can look into this. So S3 has different storage classes, and you should use the storage class based on your use case. So what is that? So like S3 has these many storage classes. So the first one is S3 standard class, which is like when you use simple S3, then it will be a standard class by default. And the durability is 11 nines, which is like 99.9 more nines. So this is how much your data is durable. So it is technically never lost. If you store something on S3, it will be never like lost unless you delete it or it is a human error. So this is how durable it is. And then availability is also 99.99%, but you see there is one where it is 99.5. So why is that less than others? So the name says S3 one zone. So let's say this is the AWS global infrastructure map. So these are the regions all over the globe, and inside every like region there could be 4 to 5 AZs. So what is a AZ? So like the brief of AZ will be, AZ is like availability zone. So the brief will be like, let's say there is one region. If you zoom in that region, you will have 4 to 5 AZs, and those AZs have redundant power and like redundant data as well. So whatever you store in one AZ will be replicated to other AZ as well, and they are separated by 100 kilometers or 100 miles, I think. So let's say your one EC2 instance is deployed on one AZ. Let's say it is in Halifax and one other one is in Moncton. So due to some reasons that Halifax AZ goes down, now your data will be replicated to Moncton AZ as well. So that's how you have availability. So that is how you reach like such high availability of 99.9%. So one more thing, one more like class you need to know is S3 Glacier class, which are like 3 types here. So when you want to store archive data, so what is archive data? So like let's say there is a financial company and they do audits. So audit is something which you need to save, but it is not something which you use again and again. So what you can do is archive it. So like we use WinRAR, right? Like in your like to archive something. So you like store those audit data into some archive type of like classes, and it will cost the least, like very minimal cost to like store the data in this compared to these standard classes. So that's why you use archive class to store the archive data which you don't access frequently. So there is one column here, I think So this is like how much time you need to retrieve that file. So let's say if it is in standard class, it will be like sent to you in milliseconds. But if it is like archive data and you have used the Glacier, then it could take hours, minutes, or milliseconds. So like for audit data, you need to request it, and then it will be sent to you in like hours or minutes, because it is audit data. You don't need it at that instance. So this is used to like save the cost, because you could be storing like TBs of data, and it will cost at the large scale, not at the like short scale. So yeah. Okay, so I'll start the lab here. By the way, assignment 2 is out, so yeah. Also, like after this lab, you'll be able to do assignment 2, so you should start early. Okay, so this is the AWS console, so I'll open S3. Also, before going that, let's back up one thing. So when you run the AWS lab, you can access everything from like console. But what if I want to use CLI? How do I do it? So to do that, if you click on AWS details and open it, it will give you a AWS CLI credential. So click on show, and it gives you this AWS access key, secret key, and then session token. So you need to copy it. Now in your like machine. So in Mac, it is in the .aws/credential folder, but for Windows, it is in app data. In local, there will be a .aws folder, and then inside that there will be a credential folder. So if you open it, and then I'll copy it again, paste, save. So now I have stored my temporary credential in my machine. So if I want to run AWS CLI commands like AWS S3 ls, which gives list of buckets, it will fire it. Right now there are no buckets, that's why no output. But now I can use everything from my CLI. So that's how you use CLI in your machine to access everything on the cloud. Also, this lab only runs for 4 hours. So when you restart the lab, you will have like new credential. So like just update it and it will be fine. And there is one shortcut for this, but it won't work in your lab right now, because it also needs a session token here. But if you have your own personal account, then you only need access key and secret key. So when you write AWS configure, it asks for access key ID, like copy your access key, and then secret ID, and region by default is US East 1, so you can skip it, and you don't need to open the file, paste manually. You just write AWS configure, and then you can paste it directly. But it only works for personal account, not this academy account. So like remember that, copy this and then manually paste it. Also, any doubt so far? Okay, so this is the S3 dashboard. So the first thing you do in S3 is create a bucket. So name of the bucket should be unique. I'll write then in which region you want to store your you want to have your buckets. So I'll keep this as same, US East 1. Then I'll keep like block all the public access. I'll keep this text, so like it is not like it can be accessed publicly. And then there is this option of enable the versioning, which means like again if you store a file in your S3 bucket and then when you re-upload a new file with the same name, it will just update it, so it will keep the old version. So once you enable it, you can only disable it. There is no button of deactivating the version, so your version will be there if you disable it, if you already have some versions. So that also, like since it is saving the versions, it will cost more because you are storing versions. And then default encryption, so all your data is by default encrypted in S3. So there are 3 types of encryption you can do, but I'll keep this same. So like Amazon S3 is like a really big service. I can have a separate lecture for this, but for the course you don't need to know everything about the S3. But if you are going for cloud architect, then you should know everything about S3 or the solution architect exam. So I'll create the bucket. Now the bucket is created, so now I'll fire this command again, and it gave me the new bucket which I've created. So I can either use console or CLI, whatever works for you, you can use. Okay, so bucket is created. Now how do I upload the files? So you click on upload. You can have multiple files in it, so I'll store few files. Okay, so these 3 files are stored on my bucket. So now we'll learn about a concept is which is bucket policy. So how many of you know IAM, identity access management? So it is used to like block the things which are not needed by a person or a group of person. So let's say I'm a QA like developer, QA tester, and I don't need to have access of a server. So what the cloud engineer will do is like create a IAM group for QA developers, give the permission of accessing the backend logs and the front end app, and I only get those kind of things because I'm a QA. But let's say someone else is a developer, then they will have access to servers, how to restart the server, like all the things which are needed by developer, and this will be managed by cloud engineers. So these things are done in the IAM section. So in this AWS lab, you don't have access to IAM because like you don't have any permission for it. You have permission of using the service directly. So everything related to IAM is pre-baked for you. So if you really want to learn IAM, then you should I'll highly suggest you to create your own AWS account and then learn about IAM in that. So let's say IAM is like first level of thing which you use to block some things which are not needed. Now S3 gives bucket policy. So like on top of IAM, you have bucket policy as well. And using the bucket policy, you can restrict further. So this is what bucket policy is. Now bucket policy, like when you create bucket policy, it is in the JSON like format. So there is a policy generator website provided by AWS, and you can use that to create bucket policies. So by default there are like these things. So let's say I want to create a bucket policy for AWS S3. Now when you write a policy, you either allow something or deny something. So I want to allow in the principal are like users, groups, etc. So you either give the group ID or user ID. So if I give star, then it allows everyone. So right now I'm allowing everyone. Now actions, so which type of actions you want to allow. If a user can update a file or only read the file, delete the file, etc. So these are the actions. So I'll give get object action, which is like read the file. So I'm creating a policy which allows to read the file, and ARN is like Amazon resource name. So whatever you provision in AWS, whatever you create in AWS has a ARN. Like if I create a EC2 instance, I'll have a ARN. If I create a bucket, I'll have ARN. If I create a Lambda function, I'll have ARN for it. So if I go to properties, then this is the ARN for my bucket. So I'll copy this, paste this here. Now after the bucket name, you write slash, and if I write star, then it will allow everything in the bucket. But if let's say I have a folder of images and then I write star, then it will only allow this policy for the images folder. So it gives you a fine-grained access to all your resources and how you restrict it. So I'll just keep star right now and generate policy. So it has generated a policy for me. So I'll copy this, go to permissions, bucket policy, and paste. This thing will be like same in your assignment as well. So make sure you know these concepts, because you'll need this in your assignment A2. And then save changes. Okay, so when you give the AWS S3 get object, it grants a public permission. But if you remember in the start, I blocked everything public. So before like giving this permission, I'll need to make this my S3 bucket as public. Otherwise, like if I give a permission of grant access to everyone to access my bucket, but if it is private, then there is no point of granting the permission, right? So first of all, I'll need to make this bucket public. So to that,
so once we make the bucket public, all the objects in the bucket are public.
Yes. So like once you make it public, not all the objects are public, but they are not accessible like as of now. But once you give bucket policy, then after they'll be accessible. Because by default everything is denied in AWS. So you'll need to give allow permission for things you want to allow. Okay, so I'll untick this, save changes. So one thing to remember, when you want to like give access to public for your files, block the public access. So like disable this public access and then give the bucket policy. Now it is applied. Yeah.
I didn't quite follow you while you said that principal part. You said the star will be to everybody.
Yeah. So let's say I have a folder principal one. Okay. This one. Okay. So let me go to IAM. I won't have access to this, but let's say like there are groups and users. So let's say I have a small company with 10 employees. Out of them, I have 3 developers, 3 QA, and then 4 business XYZ. So I have 3 groups and 1 admin. So I have 1 group of admin, 1 group of developer, 1 group of QA, and 1 group of business people. So I'll give the permission and I'll like create policies and attach those policies to a group based on their need. So now here I want to give permission to like developers to access this bucket. So I'll need to write the ARN of the group of the developers so that I can give the permission to them. So like in the principle, you write either group ARN or user ARN. So you either give a permission to user or group. So principal are like users of AWS. And resources like resources, instance, bucket, anything in AWS is a resource. Then effect, allow or deny. You want to allow something or deny something. Action is your API, what actions you want to allow or deny. You can even have conditions here if you want to add. And then these two things are like there in the every policy. So you only need to like look into this things when you create a policy. Okay, any other doubt? Yeah.
At one point, principal will have only one ARN, or it can.
You can have like a list and then comma separated. Okay, so we have like created a bucket, store file in that, allow public access to the bucket, and then gave a bucket policy so that everyone can access it. So remember when I said you can have like deploy your front end application on S3. So to do that, you have to like upload a HTML file or your React. For example, if you're a React app, then when you write npm run build, it builds your application in a small like package, and then it creates a dist folder for you, dist or build folder for you. So if you copy the whole folder in S3, then your app is deployed on S3. So that is like how simple it is. So like I have created a index.html file, and now if I go to the bottom, there is a option of static website hosting. So I'll just enable it. So it asks for two things: index documents. So my document is index.html. Error is optional, and these are also optional. So I'll just keep it as it is. And now if I copy URL and then paste it here and enter, my app is hosted. So like this is how this is very simple to host your front end application on S3. So any doubt? Also, like what will happen if I remove the bucket policy? Okay, so
Be able to access this.
yeah, so like let's try that. Okay, so bucket policy is removed. Now error. So you know why I need a policy now, right? So I'm a public. So like if I copy this in incognito, paste this, it won't work. So like I'm in incognito, so it is not asking for if I am a AWS like user which is logged in the browser. I'm just a normal person with like incognito browser and copying this, and then it is not working. So like that's like why you need a bucket policy. Even if you make your bucket public, it won't give access to your resources. You will need to specify the bucket policy in it. So any doubt? Okay. So the next thing is life cycle rules. So like this is not in the scope of your yeah.
I remember last time, not in this lab, but we created an S3 bucket. I'm not sure what are the configurations and permissions we added. Even without adding a bucket policy, we were able to access the website.
Yeah, so for that, let's say I'll remove this. Also, this concept will be used in your assignment, so make sure you know this. Okay, so let's say I want to use this file. Now I have removed the policy. So how to use it? So there is a feature in like AWS called signed URL. So what signed URL is I'll just open this, copy this. It works in incognito, even though my bucket policy is like denied. How? So in signed policies, what it does is, let me. Okay, I'll just. So this is my normal URL of that file. So my bucket name and then file name. So even if it is like not public, still I'm able to use it because it is signed by AWS. So it contains a security token, and this token is specified in this link, and it has a expiry time, I think. So this is our signature, and there should be one more. So like this is a temporary token which is created by AWS, and you have signed this URL so that it is accessible for, let's say, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, or 9 hours. By default it is 6 hours, something like that. So for 6 hours you'll be able to use this link even if your bucket is not public. Even if it is like you have blocked everything and then not kept the bucket policy. So this is how you can give access to someone temporary for your file. So for your assignment you can use signed URL, pre-signed URL. So look for that, and you can generate it via calling some API of AWS. So yeah, or you can make your bucket public, but it is less secure. Always make your application secure, so use pre-signed URL. This is the best practice. Okay, so any other doubt?
Just in case we write, can we even deploy a backend server as well, like very movement while thing or anything?
So S3 stores object and they are immutable. Your server is like running on runtime, it needs computation, so you can't like deploy like your backend on S3 because it needs computation. What we do here is like we just save objects in your like bucket. So that's why it is feasible for your front end to be deployed, but not the back end. Okay, so this is not in the scope of your like class, but I'll still explain this. So what is life cycle? So let's say I have log data for my backend application, and it generates 1 TB of logs every day. Now if generated like 1 TB of data every day, then in 30 days there will be 30 TB. So initially all the logs are stored in standard class, which cost XYZ something to me, but I don't use the logs which are like 15 days older than today's date. So what I can do is I can create a lifecycle rule which moves the objects in your bucket after XYZ day to some other S3 class. So using the lifecycle, I can create a rule which says like copy all the objects to this class after 30 days. So this will like save your like money in that sense. So this is lifecycle rule, and then replication rules. So what replication rules is like you want to replicate your data to multiple regions. So whenever one file is stored in US East 1 region, it should be stored in Asia server as well, so that if one region goes down, your file is still there. So you can explicit write rules of replication, and your data will be like saved. So these are the other features which you can use in S3. So any question? Okay, so moving to, so like this was the S3. Now we come to EC2. So what is EC2? So EC2 is like Elastic Compute Cloud. It is used to get computation or storage service which is provided by AWS. So you can have a Windows server, Linux server, Mac, Apple server, whatever server you need using AWS EC2, and it gives you flexibility of choosing your like how much memory you need, how much storage you need, which type of storage you need. Then it gives feature of load balancing, which means if you have 10 instances and you can have a load balancer about 10 instances, and the load balancer will be like managing the instances. And then what is auto scaling group? Anyone can tell? So auto scaling groups are like, let's say I'm managing Instagram and I have 10 servers. So there is a huge spike of users and my servers can't handle that much of like a load. So if I have auto scaling group enabled, then I can have a permission where it says like if my computation load goes above 50% or 70%, create 10 instance more. So that's how you scale your environment. It automatically will create 10 more instance and deploy my app to it. So this is why we use ASG to make the app scalable, and you already have a load balancer about it, so it can manage the load and like distribute the request as per it.
Load balancer basically uses existing instances, whereas ASG creates new instances.
Yeah. Okay, so to create a server, you write EC2 here, or like so when you click on this EC2, it opens this dashboard. So first of all, you go to instances. Now there are no instance running, so I'll create a new one. Okay, so the name of the instance, so I'll write my instance 1. Now here Amazon machine image, so you can have any OS you want here. These are the list of OS which AWS provides. So usually everyone uses Amazon Linux because it is optimized by AWS. It is their own image, so it will be work faster compared to others. So it is generally used by everyone. But you can like have any image you want. For example, let's say I'm using this deep learning AMI GPU TensorFlow. So when I use base Amazon Linux, then it comes with like base things which I need. So I'll need to install TensorFlow if I want to use TensorFlow. So there are these images which has pre-installed stuff. So if you want to use TensorFlow, then you can directly use this image and it will have TensorFlow installed in it. So this is the use case of it. Now which architecture you need, ARM or x86. Now this is the one thing which you should see is like which type of instance you want to create. So T2 micro is 1 CPU 1 GB memory. Then as you go down it will be increasing. So T2 small 1 CPU 2 GB memory. And also T2 micro is in free tier, so for 700 hours it won't charge you anything. After 700 hours it will charge you something, so it is in the free tier. Otherwise if you use any other instance, then it will charge from the moment you start the instance. So for this for now I'm using T2 micro, which is 1 CPU 1 GB. Now key pair login. So has anyone ever created their instance and then logged in using SSH? Okay, so a key pair is what you need. So for example, I'll write this name, my key pair. I'll come to it afterwards once the instance is running. So I have created a new key pair, let's say. So now next is network settings. So I'll keep this as it is for now. We'll come to this after we deploy the EC2. Then comes storage. So what type of storage you want. So by default it has 8 GB of root storage, and you can add new storage volume to it. So let's say if you need 1000 GB of data, then you can just create new volume and attach that storage to it. Now in the advanced, the one thing which you should know is user data. This thing will be used when you like finish your term project, and you will need to use this thing, user data. So what user data does is, like, when you create a new instance, you write a shell script command. For example, when you install when you create a new instance, Python is not installed in the basic instance, so you can write command of installing Python or XYZ service, and when you start the instance, so for the first time it will execute this script, whatever you write here. So if you have prerequisite requirement which you need to install, for example, I have Python, I need Python to be installed when I run the instance, then I can write those things here. Or you can even deploy your write the command to deploy your application on this EC2 server. For example, I have a public repo on GitHub, so I can just write git clone my URL and then npm run build or npm run preview, that command. So it will just deploy my app to EC2 when it runs. So this thing you can do using user data. So I'll launch this instance. So it will take like 1 minute or 30 seconds to launch the instance. So I'll just open it. So let's wait for instance to run. So when you run an instance, it gives you a public IP address and a private IP address. So let's say if I stop this instance and then rerun this instance, it will have a new IP address of public IP address, but it will like keep the private IP address same. So whenever you restart the server, there will be a new IP address. Okay, so the server is running. So how to access the EC2 instance? So for that you go to connect. So either you use AWS Instance Connect or SSH client. So remember we created a key pair file before. So it gives this command, these two commands. So I'll just go to, so this is the key pair which I downloaded. So I'll just copy this and save it somewhere else. I keep my PAM files in a separate folder because like it shouldn't be shared to all. So I'll go to that folder. So the first thing which it says is like chmod 400 myKeyPair.pam. So I'll just copy this and write this chmod. So anyone knows chmod command? Yeah, so like what kind of access permission you want to give to that file. So if I give 400, then it will restrict all other permissions which are given to this file. So like it can't be accessed by any other user, something like this. So this is like you make the file secure at first, and then I'll copy this command and paste it here and run. So I'm inside the EC2 instance now. So key pair file is used to connect to your EC2 instance. Or if I go to here and just click on connect, it will create a new console for me, and let's wait, and it will like create a console for me. So this is like browser experience, and you can use your local terminal as well to connect to your EC2 instance. So whatever you want to use, it's up to you. I find the SSH client better because I don't want to go to browser again and again. So that's why. So now I'll just So I'm just installing Apache server. Okay, so you know Nginx, right? So like Nginx, there is Apache server as well, which is like HTTPD. So it runs on port 80. So let's say I'm running Apache server on this EC2 machine on port 80. So if I do curl localhost 80, then it returns me an HTML file. So now if I want to use that, so I am inside this instance. So this is the public IP. So I'm copying this http / this port 80. So I should be able to get access to this HTML file, right? If I do it like this, should I get the access to it or not? Yeah, so like when I ran it in the console, it worked, but when I run this public IP :80, it didn't work. Why? Because there is a feature in EC2. So like, you know, firewall in our machines. So what firewall does is like it blocks the traffic from outside coming to us and inside coming to go outside. So like it is for security purpose. So same as here in your EC2, if you go to security, there is thing called security groups. So they are kind of firewall for your EC2 instances. So if I open this, then there are two options: inbound rules and outbound rules. So what inbound rules says is like how much traffic you want to allow coming inside your EC2 instance. So if I go to this, edit, add a new rule, give the port 80, and if you write 000/0, then it allows every IP address. So if I click on save, so now I have given inbound rule of port 80 to this source. So like basically everyone, and if I refresh it, in some time I should be able to get access to like this port 80. Okay, it is HTTPS. It should be HTTP, not HTTPS, because for HTTPS you need to do the certificate managing and all. So now I am able to access this. So whenever you run your application on EC2, you need to specify port to be able to access that code. So like, let's say I'll install Python. Okay, so I'll create a virtual environment. I'll activate the environment. Okay, so I need to first copy the code. So I'll copy the code from my local to here. So has anyone used VI or Vim? Use Nano. It is better. So I'll paste this. So now I have this app.py with this code. I'll explain the code later. First of all, I'll install the requirements. So pip3 install Flask and boto3. Okay, once it is installing, I'll explain the code. So first of all, I'm using Flask, and next one is boto3. So what is boto3? So Boto3 is a library created by AWS. So using the Boto3, you can access everything which you can access through AWS console or CLI. So when you write AWS S3 LS in your CLI, it gives you list of S3 buckets, right? So behind the scene, it is using Boto3 APIs. So Boto3 is like SDK for AWS cloud, and using that you can access your EC2 instance, create instance, manage instance, create Lambda functions, access S3 files using your program, Python, Node, Java, etc. So it has SDK for all the language. So I have installed this Boto3. So first of all, I'll just run the application. Python 3 app.py. So it is running on port 5000. So to access the app on the browser, what I need to do first? Sorry? It is running. Now if I go to port 5000, it won't work. Yeah, port. So always remember to allow the port. Okay, so now port 5000 is allowed. So it is running now. So it has given me the response. So my application is deployed on EC2 now. So the next API which I've created is this S3. It asks for bucket name and file name, and when this is called, then it creates a S3 client. It gets the object and then reads the data in the file and then return it. So basically, if I pass bucket name and file name, it will return me the content of that file, is what I have wrote here. So if I go to browser again and S3, so the bucket name is this one, and file name is file.txt. So if I do this, it gives me an error, and if I go to console, it gives me a 404 error. So let's debug it. So behind this, there is one concept. So I'm creating an EC2 instance, right? So this EC2 instance doesn't have permission to use S3, because when you create an instance, it has no permissions. So you need to give that permission to EC2. So what are the things which I can do? Can anyone? I'll just give one thing here. So can I use this credential in like I use this credential, store this credential in EC2, and then I'll be able to use the S3. So for example, if I run AWS S3 LS, then it says unable to locate credential. But if I do AWS S3 LS in my local, it gives me a list of buckets. So EC2 doesn't have permission to access the S3. So what I can do is I can write nano.aws/credential and then paste the credential here. But let's say me and him, we are both using this instance, and I don't want him to see my credential. So what other thing I can do to make it more secure? Because like if you store your credential in the server, then anyone with the access of that server can access your credential. And if your access key and secret key gets exposed, then using that they can do anything. So
two different user and data showing.
okay.
encrypt?
There is no encryption in that, so we can't do that.
Possible to assign role to EC2 instance?
Yeah. So that is the best way we can do. We can create a role for EC2 instance and attach the role to it. So we don't give explicit permissions to the EC2 instance, but we create a role and then attach to it. So how to do that? So again, you don't have any access to IAM, so everything is pre-baked for you. So if you go to EC2 instance, so when you click on action, security, and modify IAM role, there is a role which is created for you, AWS instance profile, and when you update it, then now we have created that role, and that role contains permission to access all the things which are needed for you. And if it is attached to EC2, then now if I fire AWS S3 LS, then I'm getting the bucket name. So what it does is like it creates, when you use the role, then it creates a temporary credential and store that credential in your instance, which could be same as this one. So behind the scene, it could like be creating this kind of session token for your instance, and using the role, you can like now give permission of accessing the S3. So now I have not explicitly provided the credential. So even if he has access to AWS, he can't see my credential, but he can do anything because the role is assigned to EC2. So what I can do is like I can prevent anyone other than me to use that instance. So that is the only thing I can do. So these are the best practice. So you have to use the role and attach it to EC2. Same will be used in the assignment too. So if I run the Python app again, and now if I rerun the file, it's not working. So sorry, oh yeah, S3, I forgot. Okay, so now it has written me the content of the file. So these are the concepts you need to remember. When you create an instance, you have user data to install the things you need. Then when you deploy your application, you need to give inbound rules in the security group so that you can access your application, or anyone can access your application. Otherwise it will be blocked by default. And third one is like you need to attach a role or give your permission. Like if I don't want to attach the role and I want to do the unsecure way, then what I can do is like nano.aws/credential, and then I can just copy this and paste it here, and okay, I should have used sudo. So either I could have done this way or use the profile, but you should always use the profile one because it is secure way to do it. So you never share your like credential to anyone. So this is like thing you should follow. So any doubt in the lab? Also, like when you have used like finished working, even if you stop the lab, your instance will be still running. It doesn't stop your instance. So if it is not needed, then what you can do is like stop the instance and then reboot it if you need to use it again, or you can terminate it, which will delete the instance. So you can do anything which you like. So any question? Yeah.
Like we have bucket policies, and we have EC2 policy.
Yeah. So it is IAM policy in general. Yeah. Okay, so if no one has any question, then we can conclude the lab. Thank you.